Jesus did live. He had to have lived. Who would make up all this stuff about a fictional person? For what gain? For what benefit? That would make zero sense. There's a gentleman by the name of Celsus. His belief was not that Jesus didn't exist. His thing was Jesus could not have been a God. In his criticisms, let me read to you what he tells us. Jesus had come from a village in where? Judea. And was the son of a poor Jewess who gained her living by the work of her own hands. His mother had been turned out of doors by her husband, who was a carpenter by trade. Being thus driven away by her husband and wandering about in disgrace, she gave birth to Jesus. Well, the first thing that we see here is, number one, Mary apparently had, according to him, an illegitimate child. Because the man she was about to be married to was apparently a carpenter who accused her of adultery and sent her on her way. Well, see, biblically, we know that Mary was overshadowed by the Holy Spirit, became pregnant with a child, and Joseph was going to put her away quietly. Joseph was like, this kid ain't mine. I am not the baby daddy. If it had been Maury, you are not the father. It was only because God sent an angel to talk to Joseph that they stayed together. But he hits the main points about Judea, the son of a carpenter, a mother who was accused of adultery. And then it says Jesus, on account of his poverty, was hired to go out to Egypt, and while there he acquired certain magical powers which Egyptians pride themselves on possessing. He returned home highly elated at possessing these powers, and on the strength of them gave himself out to be a god. Biblically, Mary, Joseph, and Jesus did go to Egypt, and they did return back home. The Bible tells us that an angel came to Joseph again and said, now's the time to go back. Jesus, with these powers, gives himself out to be a god. It says in vanity and pride, untruthfulness and impiety, he misled the people from their faith. Especially since he was liberal enough, they was calling folks liberal back then, y'all, look, to admit others. I'm sorry, that was not Jesus, that was me. He was liberal enough to admit others to the sonship of God. He, together with John, the companion of his execution. Anybody heard of John the Baptist? So not only are you validating Jesus, you're also validating John the Baptist lived, invented the voice from heaven at the Jordan. What? And made use of deceitful tricks of juggling for his miracles, which failed in the critical hour with 10 to 11 miscreants, publicans, and sailors. He's not proclaiming that Jesus didn't exist. He said Jesus was crazy, but he also said he had some magical powers, and this brother was out here telling people he was a god. Matthew chapter 3, verse 16. As soon as Jesus was baptized, he went up out of the water, and at that moment heaven was open, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove, alighting on him, and a voice from heaven said, this is my son whom I love, with him I am well pleased. And this gentleman that we just read said, together with John, invented the voice from heaven at the Jordan. So somehow there was a voice at the Jordan that nobody could explain, but this man with these magical powers and him and John got together and somehow invented it. Matthew chapter 13, verse 54 and 55. Coming to his hometown, he began teaching the people in the synagogues, and they were amazed. And they said, where did this man get this wisdom and these miraculous powers? Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother's name Mary? Aren't his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, Judas? And these things led me to the place where not only did I start seeing the Bible as an accurate historical document, but then I also said, you know what? Jesus did live.